I have this slide deck is linked here, this bit.ly link, bit.ly/blend K5. If you want to put that into another browser and follow along, I have been using this summer to do this session in a lot of different formats. Originally prepared it for a 3-hour session, so there are way more slides than I'll get through today, but I think it's good to have them all there so that you can go back and read it. I tried really hard to put notes in the slides notes and provide some other links. So if you want to just add this to your Google Drive, and hopefully it will be a resource that you can refer back to or share with colleagues that weren't able to attend today. I designed this session to be a real general overview of using blended learning in the elementary classroom. Although middle and high school teachers that have come to the session have found it useful as well. But I will warn you, most of my examples are from elementary classrooms, and a lot of the tools I share are used in more K-5 settings. I could probably go into far more detail about a lot of these tools and strategies, but again, this is really just meant to be an overview. So feel free to use the chat box to interrupt with questions or to share things that you're doing in your classroom and things that I talk about that remind you of things that you're working on or tools that you want to use. I do have a Padlet that we'll be collaborating on, and I'll share a link to that. And the best way to get to that later in the session is to have this slide deck open in your browser so that you can directly link to that Padlet. So I'll make sure everybody has a chance to get on this. And if I don't hear otherwise, I will move to the next slide. Don't see any comments in the chat there. So I did put a link in the chat for the slide deck. So hopefully you got there directly. So as Whitney said, my name is Nikki Vradenburg, and I am currently the Director of Education at Montana PBS. I stepped into this role just about 4 summers ago. Prior to that, I was a kindergarten and first grade teacher at Lamont School in Bozeman, Montana. Lamont was a rural K-8 school with about 60 students, multi-age classrooms. While I was there, I got to teach in the K1, and we were one-to-one iPads the last few years I was there. The final year I was at Lamont, I got to teach 4th and 5th grade. I always joke that I proved that I knew the alphabet, so they let me move into the older grade for my final year out there. When I was with that group, we had one-to-one Chromebooks. So I got the opportunity to explore a lot of blended learning strategies and get a feel for what works and what didn't work. I'm also a National Board Certified Teacher, and my certificate is in English Language Arts and Literacy. So it's always been really important to me that any digital learning we did in the classroom supported literacy, because I truly believe that's a foundational skill that we just can't do anything else in life without it. And a lot of people feel like sometimes our digital tools can get in the way of literacy, and I've certainly seen that. But I've also seen more amazing ways to support literacy using digital tools. So I'm hoping to share some of that with you today. We do have some Q&A. I don't see that one. Maybe Whitney can help me with that one.
Yes, I'll deal with that question.
You'll deal with that. Okay, thanks. So as I said before, feel free to ask questions and interrupt me in the chat box. You can also reach out to me via email, and email me at nikki@montanapbs.org with any follow-up questions or things you want to talk about further. I've taken all of the resources in this slide deck and put it into a Wakelet collection. If you like a more linear list of items, which some people do, I've tried to take all of the links and put them into just a nice linear list there on Wakelet, and you can access that on this slide, and that'll take you to Wakelet. And again, I just keep adding and adding to that resource as well. This is my favorite quote from George Couros, that technology will never replace teachers, but great teachers will do amazing things with technology. And that's really guided my work. I see technology as just another one of our tools, but the real magic happens in interactions that we see in this picture right here, when teachers and students are building relationships and working together. Today we're going to talk a little bit about blended learning and some of the language that we use. Is this a buzzword? Is this pedagogy? Is this just that thing my district is telling me I have to do this year? Where does it fit in with your overall plan? We'll talk about evaluating online tools because I think that is the skill of the moment for teachers. We have so many choices, so many things to use. It would be hard for me to tell you which ones you should use because I don't know your students and I don't know what they need. I don't know what devices you're using or what your district allows you to use. So a better use of our time is for me to give you some guiding questions that you can use when you are evaluating tools to help you pick and choose the things that are going to work best for your students. I hope to spend a lot of time or a little bit more time talking about feedback. When we are in a blended learning environment, we have more opportunities to give a lot of different kinds of feedback. I always say gone are the days when we have to carry boxes of papers home and spend hours and hours grading at night, writing notes on papers and circling things. We have so many options when we have digital tools for feedback. At the end of the slide deck are some classroom examples and some inquiry-based project ideas that once you have your tools in place and you feel really comfortable managing the classroom and blended learning, you can move into some of these more self-paced and inquiry-based projects with students. So my definition of blended learning is when we blend digital learning with collaboration, teacher learning, and independent learning. I came into the blended learning environment because I had this vision for my classroom that I wanted them to be busy all the time, engaged in meaningful work. I wanted them to have the option of working by themselves or with their peers and working with me when they needed it. I also felt that I was a more effective educator when I was working with kids in small groups or one-to-one. I felt like my whole group teaching just fell flat. For a lot of reasons. So I really tried to transform my room into a space where my kids were always busy. They had some choice about what they were doing. They were always choices that I could live with. And they got a lot of opportunities to work on their own with me or with their groups. Now we hear flipped learning a lot, and flipped learning I think is going to make kind of a big appearance this fall when we look at what remote learning and home learning and hybrid learning, a lot of the different models that schools are looking at right now. Flipped learning is kind of when we make our homework a little bit more engaging. I heard one teacher describe it as, when I feel the urge to stand in front of my kids and talk at them, I stop and make a video and assign it to be flipped so they would watch the video at another time. That's a real basic definition of flipped learning. We can do so many things that are more engaging when we have them use their time out of the classroom to engage in content, whether it's a video or a game that they play or an article that they read. The idea is that they would consume their content offsite and they would come back to the learning environment and engage with the teacher and their peers about what they've consumed. In the beginning, we saw some equity issues with flipped learning because not all kids had the same devices available to them at home, or the time or the support to do the work, just like with regular paper homework. I sense that that's changing now as schools are really working closely with their communities and their families to make sure there is access at home. And so I think there's a great opportunity if school starts up again in your area to create some flipped learning experiences for students to get them used to working at home and online, and to get their families used to some of those tools. I think both blended and flipped have great value in the learning environment today. So this is a point where we're going to have a little bit of interactivity. And this is a sticky note parking lot, which I've created a digital version. If we were in person, I'd give you actual sticky notes and have you put them on chart paper. But now I would like you to go to this Padlet wall, and you can click to it right from the link in your slide deck, or I'll put it here in the chat window too, so you can get to it. And what I want you to do is to add things to this parking lot with the tools, the digital tools you've already been using. Whether you like them or not, go ahead and put them up here. And I've sorted them into categories for learning management, for skill practice, or digital collaboration, digital creativity. Feel free to add your own little areas, other categories you think would work. But this is an opportunity for us to think about what is everybody using. So I've already seen that we've got Google Classroom is a great way to manage learning, and especially if you're a Google school. Collaboration with Google Apps for Education. I think Google provides some really powerful tools there. I love Adobe Spark for creativity, having kids create posters and websites and videos. Awesome, we've got quizzes, Kahoot. Flipgrid is an excellent collaboration tool, one of my favorites, and it just gets better and better every year. Accelerated Reader, I would put that, I think that's fine in other. I would qualify that as a skill practice platform, since that's where students are going to test their comprehension and their fluency. I can see we've got some people just adding things in the chat, and that's great too. I love that Seesaw is coming up. I see that. Nearpod, awesome. Book Creator, I think, is coming up. Zern is a really, really nice online platform for math instruction. Flipgrid's coming up quite a bit. So this is a couple of reasons. I like the interactivity. I think it's important to hear from people, especially in this online version. But sometimes we get to these sessions and we completely forget what we're using. And this is an opportunity to be reminded about some of the tools that are out there. But it also tells me as a presenter what you know about and what I may not need to spend a lot of time on. I'm excited to see HyperDocs on here. HyperDocs are such a wonderful self-paced digital tool for learning. We could spend all day on HyperDocs because there's so many options there. Kahn Academy, Boom Cards, that's cool. I don't think I'm familiar with Boom Cards. I'll have to look into that one. Screencastify is an excellent tool for creating videos. I do have a section on that in this presentation. Common Lit is one I haven't looked at in a while, but that is a great resource for literature and reading online. Excellent ideas. I'm going to switch back over to the slides, but feel free to keep adding things to this Padlet. And as you think of things, feel free to put it right there. Ooh, Vocaroo. Yeah, I haven't played with that one in a long time. This is fun. I like sharing tech tools. So that was our sticky note parking lot. As I told you, when I started blending, I had some real specific goals. I wanted small group and individual instructions, and I wanted my kids to be able to work independently and on their own. I think right now, the push for blended learning is because we know that there's probably going to be some home learning, either immediately because things change with our current pandemic happening, or because that's the model that our district has decided for us to use. I know that that's something they're looking at here in the district where my own kids go to school. So automatically I'm hearing teachers and administrators say that building a blended classroom is essential for the start of the year. Here's a great resource that I highly recommend checking out as you explore blended learning. It's called Moonshots in Education, and it's created by Esther, I can't say her last name very well, Wojcicki, and she is a high school journalism teacher. And her story was that every year she used the same book and the same quiz to teach her class, and she noticed the engagement and the interest and the success of her students got worse every year. And she wanted to do something different. And so she started using a blended model, using this acronym, which she calls TRICK, to manage the community. And so she really uses this TRICK acronym, which stands for trust, respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness. And what I love about this book, I think the first 2 or 3 chapters are good for any grade level. Because they really help you think about what your classroom community needs to look and feel like in order to implement these blended learning strategies. The book goes into a lot of detail as you keep reading it that feel more middle and high school type appropriate, and so elementary teachers might feel like there's not as much there for them. The website that accompanies the book has some great digital resources for teachers, as well as some nice videos featuring Esther talking about blended learning in her classroom and some of the things she did to manage that. So I really recommend checking out that book. The other resource is Catlin Tucker. She is one of these authors who is a former education educator, but she's also a blogger, a podcaster. She's very active on Twitter. She's published quite a few books, and she's done empirical research about blended teaching. She has a Facebook group that she keeps up to date. I love her posts because they're quick. They're written in that sort of bite-sized, easy to consume manner. And she always gives really practical tips. She shares templates, she shares lesson ideas, and she does a lot of things with Google. So if you're looking for assessments using Google Forms, she's got some templates for you to use. This book, Balance with Blended Learning, is her most recent book. And while she does say that her experiences in the high school, I felt as an elementary teacher, there was a lot there for me to use with my students as well. So connecting with her resources is something I would highly recommend. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the digital platforms that you might use for all of these different categories. And I put them up as sticky notes because, and the randomness, I hope that you get the idea here that I'm not placing any importance one over the other or saying that you need to do one and not the other. These are just all the things we can think about when we're blending and when we're picking tools to work with students. I hope that you probably already have a couple of tools in your toolbox that fall into these categories. And hopefully after today, you'll add a couple more to your toolbox, or you'll just feel really validated that you're on the right track and that you're doing what can be done for your students. So it starts for me, I think about it in this big picture, a learning management something, whether it's a paid for LMS that the district adopts and has everyone use, or it's something that you create just for your students to use. Having a home base, which is a place that students and their families can go to see their assignments, to possibly share their assignments in some way, is the thing that if we want them to be independent and we want them to self-manage, giving them this one place to go where they can find their tasks and their activities is so very important. These are the three I'm most familiar with and the ones I used with students and the ones that I see teachers using a lot today. If I went back to the classroom tomorrow, I would be Seesaw and all Seesaw. I think it's the most powerful tool for student engagement, getting student work in a digital format, sharing with families, providing them with assignments, providing them with lots of different types of feedback. It's free with some upgrades, of course, but I think if we're working with elementary students, especially, Seesaw is our most powerful tool. When I taught 4th and 5th grade, Google Classroom was what I used with my students, and that was where I put the links into our assignments, and I found that to be appropriate for their grade level, but I still liked having a student blog, a class blog, that doubled as a portfolio tool. Kid Blog is my favorite platform for that. I use that with my kindergarten and 1st graders and found it to be very easy to use for them for a time, and then ended up switching to one that was a little bit easier. And that's why I would prefer Seesaw over Kid Blog for our youngest learners. But Kid Blog is very easy to use for grades 3 and up, allows them to post their work, add comments to one another's work, and then share their work with a larger audience. So in my classroom, the best way to take the work that we did and get it online was to take pictures, post it to a blog or to a portfolio tool, and caption it. Google Sites I used in my 4th and 5th grade classroom as a portfolio tool. So as my students created things in Genius Hour or Makerspace, they would put pictures on their Google site, write a caption describing what they did, and they'd build on it all year long. So by the end of the year, we had a really nice student created portfolio of their work. So all of these things could be used together in different ways, or you could just find one. Of course, in the comments, in the notes section, I've listed some other tools such as Teams, Canvas, Blackboard, Weebly, Apple Classroom, and iTunes U. I have also used to set up self-paced courses for students. Little bit more time on the back end, but very easy for students to use as well. So it's just a matter of finding the tool that fits your style and that will be most accessible for your kids. When we evaluate tools, these are the big questions. When I open up a new tool and I'm looking at it, these are some of the questions that I ask first and foremost. Is this free? Is the first one. Because a lot of times I was working in a district where there was some money, but I really needed to be careful about how it was spent. And so a lot of times there's a platform that the free version is just as good as the paid version, or if you had the paid version, there would be features that you would never use. And so playing around with it, is it worth the subscription fee? You know, is it worth that extra little bit? Using a classroom trial and trying it out for 30 to 60 days or whatever the tool allows. If by the end of that 60 days or 30 days, you're really sad that the subscription is over, maybe that's a good sign that it's worth the subscription fee, and you can talk to admin about subscribing. If you don't even notice that the subscription ran out, there's a good indicator that those were features that you didn't need and you weren't going to use. The next question I ask is the login process. Especially working with really little kids, logging into things will be the death of me. Helping kids get logged into different platforms. There are so many strategies. Each of my kids had an index card with their names and their login, and I always tried to create logins that were super easy for them to remember, that mostly had maybe their names and a number, or their names and a symbol or something, so that they didn't spend a ton of time getting to it. And I would usually use a tool with a small group of kids and sort of watch the clock to see how long it took them to log in. And that would be a good indicator for me if this was something that was going to work for our room. And then navigation by themselves. If the goal is independence, using these tools on their own is really important. So how many training sessions will it take for them to get to independence? And really, I use my own kids quite a bit to try these things out, to be my guinea pigs. And as they get older, I'm going to have to go steal other people's kids. But right now, they're both in the sweet spot for age range. And I also look at the engagement level. You know, there are some tools that I think are amazing because the teacher end gives me a lot of good information. This is really well aligned to my goals and what I want to teach, but boy, the kids don't think it's interesting at all. The kids are looking for other things to do. So then it's time to put it to the side and find something else. And of course, the most important thing is, when kids are engaged in using these tools, are they learning what I want them to learn? So those are the questions I hope will guide you as you're evaluating things. And I'll say I tend to be a real quick evaluator. I don't spend too much time with new tools that if it doesn't give me what I want within a couple of uses, I cast it to the side and I get something else. I also rely heavily on my peers. If you are on Twitter, I would recommend asking the people in the Twitter sphere what they think of certain tools, what the pros and cons are. I saw a great dialogue just the other day between a teacher saying our school is looking at Canvas versus Schoology. What do you recommend? Several people got on and shared their experiences, and that in that real quick feedback, I think that's a great way to get an idea of what you want to use. I think closed Facebook groups are another great safe place to ask those questions and get teacher feedback. When we introduce new tools to kids, it's really important that we create time and space for them to learn those tools. I had a designated tech time every week for about 30 to 45 minutes. And the purpose of that time was to teach them how to use whatever tool I needed them to use later. Whether it was a Google tool like Drawing or Keep, or it was something that was platform-based like Moby Max or Front Row or something like that. They needed the time to learn how to log in, to explore and play around and get to know the tool. But they also needed for that to be sort of low pressure and to know that they weren't being evaluated on their use of the tool or what they were learning as a result of learning that. It was also a great time to bring in parent volunteers. I had parents that wanted to come in and help in the classroom. And so this was a time when I would just have them be in the room as an extra set of hands and to help manage and ask questions. But it also doubled in giving parents a little bit of comfort using some of the digital tools that were in our classroom as well. My favorite resource for those in the pre-K, K1 space for helping kids use tools is called the Innovating Play blog. And I have a link to it on this slide in the notes section. It's authored by Christine Pinto, who is a pre-K teacher, and she has created some amazing visuals for how we can support kids to log in, including templates you can place on the keyboard, different stickers and cues you can put on the keyboard to help them practice. The way she manages that is incredible. Her most recent post today was about supporting families with remote learning. And it's really good. It's packed full of some great resources for those little kids. But gosh, I see a lot of transference to the upper grades as well as the things that she's recommending. She's written a book called Google Apps for Littles. I highly recommend reading that because she gives some really practical advice for how to use Google with the younger kids as well. And all of that is in the notes section on this slide. So these are some of the digital platforms that come most recommended either by me or teachers that I work with. Some of them are free, some of them are not. I'm sure a lot of you have tried out a bunch of these. And again, this just, you take those questions I just showed you and look at those and evaluate that. These are the kinds of platforms that kids would log into. It would save their progress. They would work on that independently, and then as a teacher you would have a dashboard that you could go back and see their progress. I know teachers that use this to kind of track where the kids are with the standards and decide if they're ready for an assessment or if they're ready to move on. I know teachers that when they see a kid needs a little bit more practice in an area, they'll put them into certain places in one of these platforms. They're wonderful as far as the kids get automatic feedback for what they're doing. They're usually a lot more interesting than your average worksheet because there's music and the sound effects and animated characters, and some of them might be gamified with where they can earn badges and coins. And so there's enormous engagement when we have kids use some of these. However, the burnout can be pretty high. Depending on how often and how long you're asking kids to be on these platforms. My sweet spot with the little kids was no more than 15 minutes, and it was part of a center rotation. And they'd get in there, they'd log in, they'd do a little bit of work, and then they'd put it away and go do something else. With my own kids at home, I have a daughter who just finished 4th grade. She would burn out on Kahn Academy pretty quickly and drag her feet quite a bit to use Kahn Academy, but she really enjoyed Freckle. And that kept her engaged for a while. So like I said, all kids respond differently to these platforms, but I can't stress enough that these are skill practice platforms, or maybe taking a student who's a little bit higher level and giving them some work that is more matched to their level if they're working faster or higher level than the rest of the kids. But they really shouldn't replace the entire curriculum. We still need that collaboration and that teacher-led lessons and that ability to create with technology as well as with low-tech items. So this should be part of our blended learning environment, but certainly not all of it, which I'm sure everyone knows. These are some of my favorite tools for digital listening, viewing, and reading. And again, they're all on the Wakelet, and you can click to them directly from this slide. Most of these are free. I did put the $ on Time for Kids. I think having some kind of a news magazine that kids can read the current events, especially right now when the news changes so fast and it's a little bit scary and it's really hard to interpret the younger you are, having a nice kid-friendly news magazine, even if it costs a little bit of money, I think is worth it and definitely should be part of our digital literacy programs. Epic Books was a tool that we just used all the time. It was ad-free. It was engaging picture books where the kids could listen to or they could read on their own. They had that video game element in that they earned coins for finishing or reading a book, and they had a little avatar they could change and build on when they read more books. They could search for books by topic. As kids became more comfortable using Epic Books, we could use it for research. I could have them take a screenshot of a book that they read and post that on our class blog or in their digital portfolio, and then provide a caption talking about what they read and what they were thinking about it. This podcast for kids is a beautiful list, not beautiful, but really useful list curated by Common Sense Media with podcasts, and they've assigned different age groups and topics to this list. Very comprehensive. There's something in there for everyone. You know, my literacy center, when I first started teaching, was a really old cassette player with a big, huge pair of headphones and the circles. And we used cassette tapes that I bought from Scholastic that had books that went along with them. And while those still have value, it's amazing how the popularity of podcasts and how kids and adults alike love listening to podcasts. And there's so many great kid-focused podcasts out there that I really encourage kids to listen and maybe play with clay while they're listening, or maybe draw, or it's an opportunity to kind of lay on our stomachs or lay on our backs and just relax and listen and learn in that way. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention PBS Learning Media, which is a free platform created for teachers in the K-12 and plus setting, with resources that PBS stations from all over the country upload. Lots of videos and interactive games and lesson plans, all of them aligned to standards, and often many of them have support materials like graphic organizers and discussion questions to go along with them. It's a great place to find a video you might want kids to watch for a flipped lesson, or a game that you might want them to play when they're not working with you. And then, of course, Wonderopolis is one of my favorites for engaging kids in inquiry. That became another trusted research website for us as well. And sometimes we can spend all this time on the internet trying to find just the right video or article or the tool, but it just doesn't quite teach what we want it to teach. And then we need to make something ourselves. And this is the part that I think teachers got a crash course in last spring when we had to go online. I still get lots of questions from teachers asking about creating my own content. What should I use? Should I do it or not? I'm embarrassed to do it, all this stuff. I will say, first of all, kids love content their teachers create for them. They're used to you and your style of teaching and your voice, and they will learn from you on video better than they'll learn from another teacher on video. Screencasting is probably what we're seeing the most, and Screencastify is this Chrome extension that I see teachers use the most often. I have learned about Loom recently and love Loom. It has just a few features that other screencasting tools don't. One of them being, and this is with little kids in mind again, that the videos created on Loom live on Loom, not YouTube. And so when I share a video with a class, I would send them to Loom. And there's no ads, and there's no watch this video next, and there is commenting, but I can turn that off, and there is a reactions button, but I could turn that off if I wanted to too. I know some kindergarten teachers all over the country that use this to record videos for their class, and they just felt it was a little bit younger kid friendly and a little bit safer because of that not necessarily being connected to YouTube. I've used Explain Everything a lot, especially on iPads. And then of course, Seesaw has a screencasting feature built right into it. So if your students are already using Seesaw, creating a video for them using the tool they're going to be using is a natural choice. Most screencasts start by taking whatever you want to teach and putting it into a slide presentation, like a PowerPoint or a Google slide deck. This is a Google slide deck that I'm talking over right now. But I'll have teachers say to me that they feel like they're not designers. They don't have the graphic design tool skills. You know, they're teachers first, and they feel like they don't want to have a presentation that doesn't look good or doesn't look professional. And so I highly recommend going to these sites, Slides Carnival, Slides Go, or Slides Mania. These are sites that are free and have templates for slide presentations, either Google or PowerPoint. But all you do is make a copy of that template and you input your own information, and all the design and all the graphics are put in there for you. This presentation we're looking at right now is a Slides Go template. And so I played with a few things and modified a few of the slides, but most of this was all here ready for me, and I just typed in my content. So then once you've got all of your slides ready basically all you're doing is talking over each slide and recording yourself talking over each slide. Audio is another tool that I've seen high school, especially history teachers, utilize because they do have stories to tell that take a little bit longer. Most of our screencasting platforms like Screencastify and Seesaw have a limit. We can't make videos that are more than 5 minutes, and that's great. I mean, I think an instructional video for a kid especially shouldn't go beyond that. However, sometimes you need a little bit more time to tell a longer story or to engage the kids with a little bit more information. And so that's where the audio is a really nice feature. And you can just record yourself talking and not have to worry about having the video or having the slide deck. And maybe you want to talk and encourage them to do something on a note-taking guide while you're talking. And so these tools can be used. My favorite is Voice Record Pro. It is a smartphone app. And so I just use it, I hit record, I talk, I hit stop. I can upload it to YouTube as an audio file and then just share the link of the audio with whoever needs to hear it. You can get a little bit fancier with tools like GarageBand or Anchor, SpeakPipe or Audacity and really make it more podcast style. But the other great one that I don't have on here is this tool right now, Zoom. If you're using Zoom for video conferencing, you can also open up a Zoom meeting. Don't invite anyone to it, just hit record and do a screencast. When it records, it separates the audio and the video file. And so you can choose which of those two pieces you share with students. So you could share just the audio file from a Zoom recording. And I've done that a number of times, called it a podcast. And it was really just a Zoom meeting that only I was in attendance. And I shared the audio with someone. So that's our DIY content. This video I won't show because it doesn't always come across well in the Zoom meeting, but this is the first video I ever made for my students. And I put this here to let you see that it's okay if videos are bad. It's okay if you create something that is really embarrassing. This is a series of screenshots that I took on my iPad, and I was using Explain Everything to just write on the screen with my finger. And I was talking over those pictures, trying to teach my students about leaves. This was a big experiment. I wanted to see what would happen if I created this video and I hit play and watched what my students did. What happened was I played this video and they were far more engaged watching me in this video than they had been all day listening to me in person. So I knew we were onto something here with this video. They were so engaged they wanted to watch it multiple times. When they went to the centers and they had free time to use the iPads during our literacy block, they watched this video then. The next day when a couple of kids were absent, they insisted that we let the kids who were absent watch the video so that they could see what we missed. The other amazing thing that happened with this video is the kids saw how bad mine was and just sort of how it really wasn't anything fancy. It's pictures, me talking over pictures and drawing. And what they saw was, oh, well, I could do better than that. And it inspired them to make similar videos to show what they had learned with far more creativity and fancier production skills. And so it put myself out there to make this video, and I cringe to even share it with you right now because it is so bad. But I think it's important to see that we all have to start somewhere. And making really bad videos for kids to learn is a start. And so I really saw this as me. I could be in 2 or 3 places at once. So I could create a really bad short video that taught them what they needed to learn, and they could see me in different corners of the room, and I could be working with kids in person. Same can be said with their learning at home. We share these bad videos with them at home. They get what they need and they move on. The next category of tools for blended learning that I used a lot was this idea of playful learning, using games in the classroom. I spent a lot of time talking to educators and administrators and parents about the value of gameplay, digital gameplay. A lot of people have this notion that if a kid's on a device and they're playing a game, they're not learning, they're wasting time. And I take issue with that, because a lot of times, depending on the game and how it's been assigned to them, a lot of times we can use games to sort of trick them into learning. They have no idea that they're practicing skills, that they're learning about problem solving and perseverance and taking turns by playing these games. I've got a few listed here. A couple are coding games, and because coding can be something we can do in sort of a sandbox environment where we're building and creating, or it can be in a game-based platform. I loop it into this playful learning category. Really could be a category in itself. But PBS Kids Scratch Junior is my favorite coding app. It uses block coding, and kids can animate their favorite PBS Kids characters using the sequence blocks. And there's a curriculum that goes along with this app. pbskids.org/learn has the curriculum, and it has 8 scaffolded lessons that if teachers take their kiddos through each of these lessons, each lesson builds upon the last one. And by the time they get done, it really is a beautiful digital storytelling tool where kids are coming up with things that these characters are going to do and developing the codes for the characters to do them. I would say this was developed for kind of a pre-K to 2 grade age group. However, I've used this app and the curriculum with kids all the way up to 5th grade. So it definitely is an elementary tool that spans pre-K through 5. My other favorite game platform is BrainPop. Now they are a subscription, and it's one of those tools that I could always make the case that it was worth the money, and I still believe that to this day. However, the Game Up portion of that website is always free, and you do not need to have a subscription to use that. What's really cool about the BrainPop Game Up website is that you can search for games by content area, by age group, or by the amount of time you have or you want kids to play the game. So if you have 3rd graders, they're studying math concepts like fractions, you can study for 3rd grade fractions 15 minutes. And there's usually a game that fits in those search parameters, and they're free, and they don't have the ads that get mucked up. The problem I think with online games is often, in order for those sites to stay online, they need to sell their ad space, and they need to have pop-ups, and they need to have all these flashing buttons that distract kids. However, I try really hard to avoid sites like that, and in exchange for things like BrainPop or Math Snacks is another wonderful site with really rich games where kids are doing some higher level thinking and problem solving. My favorite thing to do with games is to have them play a game together. So 2 kids, 1 device, play the game together. Every 10 minutes, make them stop and talk to each other and talk about their strategies, how they're feeling, what's frustrating, what's fun, or have them take a screenshot of the game as they're playing it, post the screenshot to the class blog or to Seesaw, and caption something to do with the game, whether it's a strategy they're using, what they think they're learning, what is their next step, what are they going to do in this next level, comparing level 1 to level 3, what made level 3 harder. In the notes part of this slide, I've given you a link to the BrainPop Educators website that gives a really nice framework for teachers about how they would use games in their classroom. And I'm also going to add, I can't remember if I've added it here, but I'll add it after I'm done here. Common Sense Media has an amazing website for using games in the classroom with a game journal that you can download and have kids keep track of the games as they're playing and what their progress was like and what they learned, or of graphic organizers similar to that they can fill out, as well as lists of games that are really great for kids to play in the classroom. The next thing that's really important is collaboration, and I think we saw that as an important thing last spring. We all felt really isolated, and the kids definitely felt more isolated. And so finding digital tools that give them some opportunity to collaborate with one another, either at the same time or asynchronously at different times. Padlet is the tool we just used to share tips and tricks, to share our favorite tools. I highly recommend that as a tool to use with students in the classroom, even if it's a morning check-in with share what you did this afternoon, or share what you did this weekend, a place for them to make comments. Padlet allows you to add reactions so people can hit the heart button. They can leave comments for one another. It also has a really cool, they call it the naughty words filter, that it will flag inappropriate content. Padlet is free up to 4 or 5 walls. I can't remember which one it is, and then you have to pay for it. I just reuse the same ones over and over again, so I haven't needed to upgrade my subscription. I also like Jamboard. Google Jamboard is the Google version of Padlet. So if you're a Google school and you're looking for a digital collaboration space, Jamboard has some cool, the same features with sticky notes and adding text and inserting pictures and annotating and drawing. So just having something like that up in real time, or a link for kids to access later where they can see each other's comments and they can have some conversation digitally. Flipgrid came up in our Google, on our Padlet wall as well. I think that's one of the most robust resources for letting kids connect. I've seen some amazing things with Flipboard. A high school classroom last year watched a PBS documentary here in Montana, and then we had the same classrooms watch the same documentary in Iowa and Texas, and then they all got on Flipgrid and shared their reactions to the documentary and left comments for one another, and it was a really cool way for them to collaborate with kids that were outside of their building as well. So a lot of options on Flipgrid. They make it better and better every year. They just keep adding more amazing tools that Flipgrid really is the potential to be a powerhouse blended learning tool. Talking about feedback, I think that becomes really important when we move to teaching online. And I saw that with my own daughter, that the things she got feedback on, she was motivated to keep working on. The things that she didn't get feedback on, she wanted to put down and give up on. And she's a pretty bright student. So we know it's really important in a blended environment. If we're not face-to-face with kids and they're in charge of their own learning, we have to make sure that there are things in place so we can provide them with feedback, even if it's just a quick pat on the head with, yep, I see that you did that, thank you. I think in the digital blended space, we have greater opportunities for all kinds of feedback. We can write things, we can record video, we can record audio, and using either face-to-face in person or video conferencing, we can have those one-to-one meetings with students. I've put an example up here of what the feedback options are in Seesaw, because you can start with the like button, which is just the same as like drawing a star at the top of their paper or putting a stamp on their paper. To me, that just acknowledges, yep, you did this, I see it, thanks. And not everything needs any more than that. But then we also have the option to type comments or audio record comments. I love that Seesaw added the audio comments because with my little ones, when I was teaching, reading wasn't there. So their parents would be leaving these lovely comments on their blog posts, but they couldn't read them. So having the option to listen to their feedback from either me or their parents was a big one. And parents who are connected to Seesaw can give their kids feedback in the same way. The other option is video comments, and I'm not going to show you this because it's not very good, but I wanted you to see what it looks like in the platform. I open up Seesaw, I choose post to student journal, video. I record a video of me talking and telling the student what they need to work on for a certain assignment, and then I post it just to that student's journal. They get a notification that it's there and they can watch the video and they receive that asynchronous feedback from me. Another tool I just learned about this summer that I think is awesome is, and I put the link in the notes of this slide, called Talk and Comment, and it's a Chrome extension. And it allows you to create an audio file over top of anything. And then it produces a link, a hyperlink, and you can paste that hyperlink into an email, a Word document, right into your Google Classroom. So in Google Classroom, I can create audio directions by using the Talk and Comment extension and then putting that link right in the description so kids can hit play and hear me giving them directions or hear me giving them feedback. Google Read and write is another tool that teachers really like for having things read to students, but I haven't seen it used much for providing audio feedback, but I did throw that in there because that's another great extension. So I want to talk a little bit about, okay, so we've chosen our tools, we have an idea of how we want to give feedback. Now, how do I implement this? What does this look like in a classroom? And so some of the blended strategies that I'm the most familiar with are station rotations, choice menus, project-based learning, and combinations of all of those things. And so the next few slides sort of talk about how we might use that. And so when I think I talked about, we would demonstrate new tools with students and I would show how to use it. And then I'd have the students use it on their own, maybe in a small group. And then when I felt really good about their ability to use that tool or do that activity, then I'd put them away on it independently. I was really, really structured about how I taught these tools. I did it, one at a time. We practiced it and practiced it and practiced it before I introduced anything new. So an example of that is using the tool Wonderopolis, and I talked about that a little bit ago. Every day in my classroom, and when I taught K1 and then when I taught 4th and 5th, we began with a Wonder of the Day routine. And Wonder of the Day was Wonderopolis, which is a wonderful website that has a big question about a topic: why do dogs pant? Where are kangaroos nice? These big sort of open-end questions. And then they are posed, they come in the room and they've got a blank notebook on their tables. They look up at the board, they see an image or a picture, and they draw and write whatever it is that picture made them think about. Then I bring them back to the rug and we talk about the picture, they talk about what they drew, and we maybe do some turn and talk. And then we go to the Wonderopolis website, we read a little bit, we look at more pictures, we watch a video. I could make that last 10 minutes or I could make it last 30 minutes depending on what our morning was like. But they watched me use the Wonderopolis website every single day. So in January, when I introduced Genius Hour to my class, they were really comfortable using Wonderopolis for their own research, and they had seen me navigate the page. So when it was time for them to pick up the iPad and follow the Wonderopolis link on the home screen, they could see how they could watch videos or how they could listen to the text using that website. And so that's an example of the I do, then we do, then you do, and how we used the Wonder of the Day. I've had teachers talk about when they did home learning, they had Wonder of the Day in their Seesaw or in their Google Classroom, and they'd post that big question, they'd post that image, they'd have kids take pictures of something they drew after talking about the image, and then they had a little bit, or they used Flipgrid to share their thinking that way. So there's a lot of options. Wonderopolis does integrate with Flipgrid really well for this type of routine. Wendy, do I have any questions that I need to answer, or are you answering?
We can wait until the end.
Okay. All right, I'll stop in just a few minutes so we can answer questions. The next blended learning strategy is station rotations. And I think most elementary teachers use this in some way or the other. Is the option that kids are rotating through and doing different things, and one of the stations is working with a teacher, and the other one might be combinations of things using technology and things not using technology. The listening station, we can listen to podcasts or audiobooks. We can watch videos or read books online. We can play digital games, or we can play regular board games and matching games. And then that skill practice platform can be one of those stations. Catlin Tucker created this example that I think is a really neat visual, where we think about it in just 3 rotations. One's teacher-led, one's online, one's offline. So what will they do at the offline station? What will they do at the online station? And then even grouping them, so maybe you don't meet with every group every day, but they have a schedule of when they meet with you. I set it up so I was always meeting with my groups every single day for 10 to 15 minutes. We did math stations, and we did reading stations, and we did science stations, and I rotated them through like quick. So they had chances to work with me and chances to work with digital tools and work with their manipulative tools. And then the last thing I'll share is menus, choice boards, and playlists. For me, this was a really great way to give my students some choice over what they did. But like I said before, I could live with all of these choices. And if you look at this one, this is an example where they would do something and then their post would have them posting it on Seesaw or to our class blog. So this was documentation and accountability for what they were doing when they weren't with me. So I could go through and check the Seesaw posts and make sure that they did what they were supposed to do. I might have it be a 3 in a row. I might have it be a blackout. I might have a your choice in the middle and they could come and talk to me about what their choice would be. But I found in the afternoons especially that moving to a choice board and giving them their freedom in choosing what activities they did for up to an hour or maybe a little bit more made for a really busy and engaged classroom. I think I've added some examples of playlists, and hyperdocs also fit into this. They're a type of choice board as well, where the students are kind of picking what they do and moving at their own pace. And I put some of those links in the description of the slides. I'm going to stop right there because we're up for time and I do want to give people an opportunity to ask some questions. My remaining slides have a lot more student examples and talk a little bit about how to get kids in more of an inquiry-based projects. And so feel free to piece through those and take a look, and I have a lot of Seesaw examples on there as well if you kind of want to see what student work in a Seesaw classroom looks like. But this is my contact information and all of the websites where you can find resources, and I'll just open it up. What questions can I answer before we take off for the day? Looking at the chat. Whitney was kicked out. She's trying to get back on. Ah, okay. That would explain for the quiet nice thing. I think if I can find I think I can find the polls here. Where would I begin as a teacher who feels overwhelmed by all of this? I want to do all of these things, but how can I get myself going? Yes, okay. I always worry about overwhelming people. I would start with that Catlin Tucker resources and getting on her blog and looking at some of the resources that she's got, or going to that Moonshots and Education website and kind of taking a look at that. Then I would look at the things you have to teach. And whenever I implemented something new, I always started with content that to me felt very right or wrong or sort of basic. And so for me, that was either spelling or vocabulary lists. And so I would think of what are some ways I could blend my instruction so that using spelling and vocabulary. And so maybe that's looking at Spelling City as a skill-based platform. Or something along that nature, and having kids rotate through some stations where they would do some work with you and then work to that skill-based platform. And then maybe we'd implement Seesaw and have them talk about what they learned in Seesaw. That being said, I think Seesaw has a lot of scaffolds in place. The activities library has a lot of examples for digital activities that you can give students that are that blended nature, but a nice blend of hands-on as well as digital tasks. So I would look at Catlin Tucker's blog, think about just one content area to start, and then maybe explore Seesaw and the activities library. Did my students have individual portfolios or class portfolios? So we had all of that, yes. We had a class blog, and that each of their part of that blog served as their portfolio. When I moved to 4th and 5th grade, we had that as well, but then we also had Google Sites that they added content to during our Makerspace and our Genius Hour. How do I check these? I just monitor them over time. I found that I checked them a lot around progress reporting time or during report card time, and I would refer to them before conferences or when I needed to really write about their progress. And it was something that, you know, instead of grading a stack of worksheets, because I was giving them different assignments, I was scrolling through their portfolios. I also had them look at each other's portfolios and give each other feedback. And so, and then I kind of circulate the room and look over shoulders and see what was there as well. Let's see, I got a couple more. Do you say there's access to the slideshow and find notes you mentioned? Yeah, let me give you the link at the beginning. This is the bit.ly, bit.ly/blendk5, and that is the slide deck that I'm going through right now. And then on slide number 3, I believe it is, I also have a link to a Wakelet that lists all of these links in more of a linear stream for the Wakelet, if that helps. Let's see if I miss any questions here. All right. All right, well, thank you so much. Like I said, feel free to reach out if I can help you with anything. My job is to support teachers in Montana, and so I'm happy to do that. And I also am on Twitter and try to be very active on Twitter. And so I would love it if you reached out and asked questions there as well. That's my email and that's our website. And I don't know if they're saving these recordings. Maybe somebody can answer that in the chat there. But thanks so much. I'm presenting again this afternoon at 1 o'clock about using digital tools for family communication. So I hope to see some of you there. I think I got everybody in there. All right. So save it from, I don't know if it was recorded. I think it is recorded. I'll stay on in case she wants to get back in. I see that it's recording. I'll hit stop recording.